Hello, everybody. Hope you're enjoying your Thursday evening. I'm back with another stream. I know my last few videos I've done have been on the verses in Genesis, which I plan to continue. Um, I mentioned in the last video, wanted to also do a different class on the Talmud. This is it's called the Ein Yaakov, which is a compilation of, the body of the Talmud has many facets to it. Mainly, it's a work on the Jewish laws, but one of the components of the Talmud is many different esoteric texts. So the Ein Yaakov essentially filters out a lot of the um, back and forths regarding the laws, and it focuses on many of the stories of the Talmud, um, and less focused on the complexities and the details of all the laws. Um, so it's interesting when I was thinking about doing this stream. I was thinking about how it almost seems like heretical in a sense to um, strip away the Talmud from its full body of work, and to maintain just the parts that are sort of, I guess, more fun and more interesting and catch your eye. Um, and I'm sure I know the history. I don't know. I'm not so familiar with the history of it. I know it was compiled in the 15th or 16th century. My understanding is that it was supposed to make the Talmud, I think, more accessible to people, but I really don't know the history of it. But it is interesting that this is basically it's not the full version of the Talmud, it's a compilation of the text. Um, oh, Jacob is here. Hi, Jacob. Great to see you. I'm really excited to do these on the Talmud. I don't know how they're going to go. The Talmud, even though this is the not the full version of the Talmud, and it is a selection of texts. The Talmud is what I primarily studied in yeshiva for many years, and one of the things that I really enjoy about the Talmud is um, I love the way the Talmud thinks. It is um, it's like a stream of consciousness, and I hope through this, even though we're not going through the full text, I hope even going through part of the text, we'll be able to get an appreciation of how the Talmud thinks and how the Talmud operates. Um, and I just think it's really exciting to um, try to get into the frame of mind of how the Talmud flows. Um, the first text here is actually a bit technical, ironically. Um, Even though obviously I mentioned that this is supposed to be more like fun text and it's less technical and getting into the complexities, but the first text here does start a bit complex, and we'll see how it goes. I know, going through the verses of Genesis is more um, generic, and I think it's more accessible to everybody. The Talmud is, for me, less accessible just because it's um, more difficult and it does get into the details. But I want to just see how this goes, and you'll give me your feedback on what you think about it, and hopefully we'll have some insights along the way. I like how the Talmud thinks is a great line. Yangan, thanks for joining. I appreciate it, and I love when you comment. Um, it's interesting that when I was in yeshiva for many years, one of the things that the rabbis spoke a lot about, because we were studying Talmud the entire day, basically. I mean, from the age of like the bar mitzvah years till many years after, the Talmud was the focus of the day, going through these texts, analyzing them. To put it in perspective, we would focus on 10 pages of the Talmud. The Talmud has around roughly 3,000 pages. And we would focus on 10 pages for the entire year. So we could spend 2 or 3 weeks on just 3 lines of the Talmud, analyzing it with all the commentaries. And one of the standard issues for people who are in that yeshiva system is they sort of come to a point where they say, what's the point of all this? Like, we're just analyzing and analyzing, and it's circular and it doesn't stop. And the constant claim of the rabbis in the yeshiva was that it's teaching you how to think, and you're supposed to be able to use that thinking in your real life, this way of analytical thinking. And I think it was only many years after I left yeshiva that I start to appreciate what that means, and how this way of analyzing really does help you in your day-to-day life. So I hope I can share that with all of you. So I'm going to begin. I'm just going to try to get through the first page here. It's relatively short, and you'll let me know how it goes. So the first text begins. The name of this tractate is called Brachos, which means blessings. It focuses on a lot of the prayers that's in the Jewish tradition, as well as a lot of the blessings we make before food. That's the general. Those are the main topics of this tractate. So it begins here. Me'emasai Koran es Shema ba'arbis. When can you recite the Shema prayer in the evening? So this is the Mishnah. So before you have the Gemara, you have the Mishnah, which is at an earlier time period, and the Talmud is a commentary on the Mishnah text. So the Mishnah says, it asks the question, when can you read the Shema prayer? At night, because we typically read the Shema prayer in the morning and the evening. So the Mishnah answers that we read it Misha shekohanim nichnasin lechol b'trumasan. We begin to read it at the time when the priests in the times of the temple would go in to eat their truma, which is the gifts that they would receive, the food they would receive. That's when the beginning of that same time is when you can start reading the Shema prayer in the evening. And the Mishnah continues and says, when is the end time? The end time is Ad Sof Hashmur Rishona, at the end of the first watch. And that is something that's going to be discussed further in the Talmud. What does that mean, the end of the first watch? Both of these are very ambiguous, that the time you start the evening prayer of the Shema is when the priests eat their food, their fruits, and the ending point is the beginning of the first watch of the evening. Is all very ambiguous to start here, but it will be elaborated. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, these are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. The rabbis say, Ad chatzos, you have until midnight. And there's a third opinion. Rabbi Gamliel says, Ad shi'al amud hashachar, until the morning. You have up until the sun rises in the morning. So we have three different opinions. Seems very typical of at the beginning of a Jewish text. 3 different opinions on when the last time of the night and the evening when you could read the Shema prayer. So the Mishnah continues and says there was a story. Maisa uvo bana b'beis Mishnah. There was a story when the children of Rabbi Gamliel, who's the third opinion here, who says you have until the morning to recite the Shema prayer. There's a story that he came, that his sons came home from a feast, and Amrulo, they said to their father, Rabbi Gamliel, they said, Lo karino Shema. We haven't yet read the Shema prayer. So Amar Lahem, he said to them, Imlo Ola Amud Shachar, if the sun has not risen yet, Chayav v'natem likros, you are obligated to read. Which obviously goes according to his opinion that you have up until the morning. You have until the sun comes up. And he continues, Vilozil bilvad omru, and not only that, Ela kol ma she'amru chachamim ad chatzos mitzvason ad shi'al amud hashachar. So this is maybe a first example of how these texts think, if you can call it that, which is these children, Rabbi Gamliel's children came to him after a party, and they said, we haven't recited the prayer yet. And he said, well, you're allowed to read it until the morning, so you're in good shape. But Rabbi Gamliel doesn't stop there. He says, I'm also going to tell you why that the rabbis also agree to what I'm saying. So to start the Mishnah, there was a three-way argument. So between when the ending time is, and the rabbi said you only have until midnight to recite the Shema prayer. So there is a concept that when you have an argument between a single individual and a group of individuals, so a group of rabbis, then you go after the group. So you go after the majority. That's the rule in the Talmud. So the children of Rabbi Gamliel understood what their father believed, but they came to him and they were saying, we know you think that you're allowed to read until the morning, but we know that the rabbis say differently, and we also know you follow the majority. So even though they phrased their question as, are we allowed to still read, their father understood that underneath their question, they were asking something different. They were saying, yes, we know that you think we are still allowed to read the Shema prayer now, but we know that the rabbis say otherwise, and we also know you have to go after the majority. So this is just a great example of how within the story, you see how Rabbi Gamliel is a step ahead, and he's already reading between the lines as to what his children are thinking. And he says, every time the rabbis say you only have until midnight, they actually do agree that you really do have until the morning, as is my opinion. So they are on the same team as I am. Which obviously, and he gives two examples, Hector chalavim ve'ivarim, mitzvasan ad shi'al amud hashachar, v'chol hanechalam liyom echad, mitzvasan yet shi'al amud hashachar. He gives two examples of regarding the sacrifices, where there's a time limit as to when you have to finish eating the food, and the rabbis say you only have until midnight, but really they do say you really, it's understood that they agree if you go until the morning, that's okay, but they still say you have until midnight. So the obvious question is, why do the rabbis do this? Why, if they actually think you can technically go until the morning, why do they make the deadline midnight? So the Rabbi Gamliel finishes and he says, why do they say you have until midnight? Because they want to distance man from sin. So even though the rabbis agree with me, they put in this boundary that you only have until midnight. That way, someone has that barrier and he's not going to stumble and let things go until the morning. And I think this is, in terms of the beginning of this is the beginning of the Talmud. I think this is a great indicator of what's to come, which is this is a rabbinic text, and the primary feature you're going to see is a lot of boundaries that are added to the biblical text. So I think this is a foreshadowing that the first Mishnah the first Mishnah in the rabbinic literature of the Talmud is already gives that foreshadowing right here. So that's the end of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara, the Talmud, is going to elaborate on it, and it gets a bit technical. Even though this is the Ein Yaakov, which, as I mentioned, is usually not this technical, but this is how it starts. Michti, Kohanim Amos Ka'achli B'Truma. So the first question the Gemara is dealing with here is the Mishnah started by saying that the time when you could start reading the Shema prayer is when the priests go and eat their fruits. That's when you can start. But the Gemara asked obviously a simple question. Well, when is that time? When do the priests eat their truma? When do they eat their first fruits? So the Gemara answers, Misha Seisach. They eat it when the stars come out at night. So the Talmud then asks the question: if it's true that this time where the priests eat their food is the time when the stars come out at night, so listening Misha Seisach, why doesn't the Talmud just state that time? Why does the Mishnah have to say sort of this obscure mention about the priests? Why not just say the time when you could actually bring the Shema prayer? So the Talmud answers, Milsa Agav Orcha Kamash Malan. The Mishnah wanted to teach us another thing. So it was an opportunity to teach us something new, and that's why it said it in this obscure way. And what was that thing they wanted to teach us? Kohanim Amos Ka'achli B'Truma. When do the Kohanim, the priests, eat their truma? Misha Seisach Lechavim. They eat it when the stars come out. So what's interesting here is, and this gives a little bit of an indicator of how the Talmud thinks, is the Talmud doesn't stop here, because it's really enough at this point to stop and say, okay, that's an answer. And that's why the Mishnah said it in this bizarre way. But the Talmud is not satisfied with this. It's not enough, because the Mishnah doesn't just say fun facts. Just to say a fun fact is not enough of a reason to state something in a roundabout way. So that's why the Talmud proceeds and explains further. And it says, okay, but why wouldn't I have known that already? And the Talmud answers that. The Talmud is going to explain how you may have thought differently, that it's not the case that the priests eat their food at this time of day. So it continues and says, "V'hakamash malan dekapara lo ma'akva." You might have thought that the forgiveness is not me'akev. So uba kinatanya uba hashemesh v'tar bia shamsho ma'akvaso melecha truma ve'ein kaparaso ma'akvaso melecha truma. So you may have thought that hold on, let me just remember here. Give me 1 second. I'm forgetting this text. Right. Sorry about that. So you may have thought that basically after the next day there's a sacrifice that has to be given. So you might have thought the kapara lo ma'akva katani uva shem shvitar bia shamsho me'akvaso melecha truma, but the ein kaparaso me'akvaso melecha truma. Umay dahai uva shemesh bias hashemesh v'hai v'tar tar yoma dilma bias orahu umay v'tar tar gabra. So you may have thought that you would have to actually wait until the next morning. And therefore, this Mishnah is coming to tell you that once the evening actually passes, then it's enough for the priest to eat at that time. And then the Gemara continues to elaborate on these verses. So Amar Rav bar Shila, Im Kain Lema Krav Yitar. So if that's the case, then why does it say Vayitar, my V'taher tar Yoma? So if it was true that you had to wait till the next morning for the person to actually go through the a ritual bath, then it wouldn't have said my V'tar tar Yoma. So it's getting into a technicality about how this verse is phrased. My V'tar tar Gavra. Right. So Vayitar is a phrase which is taking like an action where the person would have to actually take an action, and Taher is more of a passive phrase referring to the day just ending. So that's an indication that this verse does mean that once the day passes, that's when the person is now purified and he can eat the truma. He can eat the fruits. So the Talmud brings a phrase that supports this, that that b'taher means that the day has cleared. And then the Talmud basically repeats this again. B'marava hadarav bar Shila lo shemilahu. In the West, Rabba bar Shila, that's the name of a rabbi, lo shemilahu, he did not hear this text that we just quoted. Ubai lo mibai, and he asked the same question. Jacob, it's talking about Tivol Yom. Yes, correct. Jacob, you're joining?
Yes.
How do I? Hey, how's it going?
Good. Yeah, if I remember correctly, it's talking about Tivol Yom.
Right. So let me just look at this. I was trying to look at the art scroll here and remember.
Looking at the art scroll, you kaifer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Wait, so let's just go back here for a second, Jacob.
So the idea is
so it says the kapar loma. What'd you say? Sorry.
You're Cohen, aren't you?
No, I'm a Levi. Me and Chezi.
I thought you were Cohen.
No.
Just to explain Tivol audio, in order to eat true given to the priestly caste, they had to be tahor. And I believe it's been a long time. It's been 25 years since I did this Gemara, I think. In order to eat, they had to go to the mikveh, and then they had to wait until the end of the day. And so that's the lashon of ba shemesh v'tihar.
Right. Yeah.
So it was possible you might have thought that a Tibul Yom has to wait until the morning when they can bring their sacrifices in order to eat truma.
Right.
But apparently they can eat truma from
before they immerse themselves, correct?
No. After they immerse, right?
Okay.
Then the question becomes, right? Apparently, I forget what exactly a Tibul Yom has to do, but apparently they go to the mikveh, and then
you're right.
bring a sacrifice, right? The sacrifices in the thought that he can't eat truma until
Right.
he
Your audio, I think, Jacob, I think your audio is and your
yeah,
video is a little bit
it's my
slow.
connection's unstable, unfortunately.
How'd that happen?
It's probably my connection. Like Spectrum is
I thought it was just like the holiness of the stream is just shutting everything down.
maybe my tuma is ma'akev. That's
Wait, no, I'm really happy you joined because I was sort of like glitching and I like didn't know really how to recover. So I'm really happy you joined here because now I can talk it out. So um basically right, so Kyle, it is the tefillah or the yom that allows them. So basically it is the wait a second, let me see it one more time. Right, so it's the sacrifice he has to bring the next day does not hold us back. Right, all he has to do is immerse in the mikvah, and then that night he's able to eat, and he doesn't need to wait to bring the sacrifice the next day.
yeah, or it might even be that he has to wait until the morning in order for something to be mishamesh.
Possibly, but in terms of this text here, so let's just pull this back up. Where is it? Oh, I don't know if I can. Oh, I have to change the screen, right?
Yeah.
So to go back here, so it says, "Umay dahayuva sheme." No, wait, where do I want to start from? Okay, here we go. So let's just read this again to make sure I understand what's going on here. Milsav agav or kamash blood kohanim emas kachli b'truma. So the Mishnah wants to teach us that when do kohanim eat the truma? Mishas is lechavim, and kamash blood teaches us that the kapar lo makba, right? That the kapara, the carbon that they bring the next day, does not hold him back from eating the truma now at night. That's what's going on, right?
Or it might not even be. I might have been wrong. It might be just he has to wait until the morning to be mishamish, because it says uva hashemesh v'taher biat shimshomak makavto melechol truma the
Right.
kaparato makto. No, the kapara has to be, I guess.
Right. So what it's saying is that the setting of the sun,
right,
which is the time when he does his immersion, that is what holds him back from eating the truma. But ein kaparas machol truma. But the carbon that he brings the next day, that does not hold him back.
okay,
And that is what our Mishnah wants to tell us. That's what's going on here. Okay, great. So now we can continue, and then it goes into. So now the Gemara basically, instead of being happy with this, it then wants to question it. That's the next part here. So it says, Umimai, the Hayu Uva Shemesh, B'yesh Shemesh. How do you know that Uva Shemesh is talking about the setting of the sun? The Hai V'Taher, and when it says that, and now the person is pure, Tar Yoma, it means that the day, sorry, that Tar is referring to the day ending. Dilma Bias Oruhu, maybe Uva Shemesh is talking about the sun rising, right? Umay v'taher, and the tahir is talking about tar gavra, that the man then becomes pure because he brings the sacrifice in the morning, right? So it's trying to say maybe we can flip it, and maybe, meaning I guess now at this point the Talmud is saying, how did the Mishnah understand that this is true? Because you can interpret the pasuk, you can interpret the verse differently. That's how I understand this right now.
You have to have a havamina, right? What is the Mishnah coming to teach? Must at least have a havamina. If there was no havamina, if there's nothing you might have thought which has a makor in Torah, then why would the Mishnah be teaching you? It would be shita.
So you're saying this next point is continuing to say why the Mishnah chose to use this obscure reference. Got it. Okay, got it. So you might have thought, if that's true, then it would have said Vayitar, my Vitar, Tar Yoma. That it's referring to the day ends. That's what is creating the impetus for him to be able to eat and to be considered pure. Like people say, Erev Shimsha, the sun said Yoma, and the day is clear. So they're trying to use a phrase that was used then, an Aramaic phrase, to show that the Idchi Yoma, the clearing of the day, and the Tahar Yoma is the same phrase. And then it continues, B'marava, Hadarav Rav Shila lo Shemilahu. So Rabbi Rav Shila didn't hear any of this. Ubo lo, and he asked the same question. Hayuva Shemesh B'Yashamshu, Umay V'Tar Tar Yoma, Odumo B'Yas Erahu, Umay V'Tar Tar Gavra. It's just repeating the exact same thing, which is, again, I think an interesting thing to note about the Talmud, that it does this, where it's just repeating something because it was like
giving you a raya from Eretz Yisrael, right? So it says B'marava, right?
Oh, interesting.
So this is the Talmud Bavli. It's the Babylonian Talmud, right?
Right.
So there was the yeshivas in Babylon, and
Right.
so in order to clarify why did Rebbe write the Mishnah, redact the Mishnah? Because it was something that by memorizing and repeating it, you could remember all of the oral law that was handed from generation to generation.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And what are the Talmuds? What are the Gemaras? They are a discussion of, okay, you who know the Mishnah, this is how you have to darshan the Mishnah. This is how you have to understand the Mishnah. So when a Mishnah comes and tells us what time do we read the Shema, right? We start from when so this is all a very cryptic encoded text. You have to you have to unencode it.
Sure.
And so you start by asking, so why does it use this language? Why doesn't it just say straight out? Because it includes also a teaching about the Kohanim. That's why it mentions the Kohanim. Well, why do we need to teach that about the Kohanim? Because I might have thought X, Y, and Z, this thing about Tibul Yom, and then it brings a proof that yes, in fact, this was something that they used to discuss, because he came all the way from Eretz Yisrael, right? And got it?
Right. And then, though, it's interesting, and then it says V'hadar Pashlim Raisa, and then the way in the Marava in Israel, when Rabbi Bar Rav Shila had this question, he ended up answering it from a brisa, similar to Chavim. So he actually, and that's not ascribed to our Mishnah, it's a different text where he actually is showing that it is the same time, which is when the stars come out.
Right. So to explain, the Mishnah is officially the mnemonic poem that Rebbe redacted, that the 6 orders of the Mishnah, right?
Yeah.
The Talmud. Then there are other collections which weren't by Rebbe, which we call the Tosefta, right? There's the Tosefta, and then there are teachings which weren't in the Tosefta and weren't in the Mishnah, but are brought in the Gemara, and these are referred to as Braitas. All of these are Tanaitic statements in addition to the Midrash, right? All of these are Tanaitic teachings which the Gemara discusses.
Yeah. Yep. So Shema Mina in the Talmud finishes this piece. It says Bia Shamsho Hu Umay V'Tar Tar Yoma. So we see from here that the setting of the sun, Umay V'Tar Tar Yoma, that when it says the sun set, it means that the day is finished, which is talking about Seisar Chavim when the stars come out. And then it skips a bunch of text in the actual, and it just jumps to the end. I think it skips an entire page, and it just goes to Amar Rav Yossi Bein Hashmashos Keharaf Ayin Zenechnas V'Yotze V'Yev Shalom Adolav. It just has an opinion about Rabbi Yossi that Bein Hashmashos, which is the time between the afternoon and the evening, the Bein Hashmashos, that is
it's
basically
blink of an eye, yeah.
Correct, the blink of an eye, yeah. it's different opinions there. It's interesting. I'm really curious about this, how the Ein Yaakov, how he compiled this text, because it's so random, right? Because there's a couple opinions on the next page about Seisach Chavim and what that time span is, and he just pulls out one rabbi and just throws it in here, which is interesting.
One of the things about the Ein Yaakov was that it was meant for women and for Amaratzim, right? For the common folk who couldn't understand the whole coming and going of the entire Mishnah. Talmud. So it was an abridgment, and before, there's four types of rabbinic texts. There are codifications, there are commentaries, there are abridgments, and there are responsa. Okay, so this is an abridgment, like the Rif was an abridgment, right?
Sure.
You take from the Talmud, and you make a collection of things that somebody, you can't understand the entirety of the Talmud. You can understand this abridged collection of things from the Talmud.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the Beis Yosef thought he was ready to Shulchan Aruch for Baba and playing on the weekends. Okay, that's gonna be the next series.
Shulchan Aruch?
Yeah.
With the Taz and the Shach?
Oh my gosh. That'll be brutal. That'll be brutal. Yeah. We can continue. I don't know if you want to continue here.
I have to leave in.
Hey, it works out. This is I was only planning on doing it until that point. And thank you for saving me, because I really didn't understand it. So thank you.
I just remember. I mean, this is the first page of Talmud, so it's one of those things. Amaratzim actually just pick up the Talmud and start from the page. We don't go to yeshiva with and learn the yeshivish mesechtas, etc., like some people did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I learned this text actually in 10th grade. That's when I learned this tractate.
Okay. Brachos isn't one of the yeshivish mesechtas, if I remember.
No, that's because in Eretz Yisrael we learn the yeshivish mesechta, so we learn that like in depth, but then we also learn something Bekias to do it quickly. So in 10th grade I learned this one. So it's a fun one. It actually has it's actually the longest text in the Talmud. Brachos. So yeah, awesome. Okay, short and sweet.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.